Shout out to that Willy Wonka type beat in the beginning. Also, shout out to my braider for lacing me. Oftentimes I talk about the cameras and lenses that help me create content, but the real workhorse behind the scenes is actually my editing machine. In the past, I've used my 2020 M1 Mac Mini to edit the majority of the videos that you've seen on this channel, but I've been using the 16-inch M1 Pro Macbook Pro, these names are crazy, for the past several months. Now the question is the M1 Pro enough? Also, have I seen a real difference since adding this machine to my workflow? Now, if I'm being honest, I actually prefer editing over filming most of the time. Don't get me wrong, the magic definitely starts with planning, lighting, and filming your shot, but it finishes in the edit. There's something special about seeing it all come together in the final edit. Now, I've been editing on Macs for the past decade plus, and of course, my NLE of choice is Final Cut Pro 10, and the 2021 M1 Pro Macbook Pro is quite literally the most important tool when cranking out this content. I also use this computer to produce content throughout the work week for my day job as a video producer and editor for JFL Network, John Rettinger and team, and every now and then, of course, to produce videos for this channel, like the one you're watching now. One of my favorite features when it comes to this machine is the screen. And I'm a big guy, I like big screens, and this 16-inch MacBook Pro does not disappoint when it comes to the display. Not only is this screen great for watching Dolby Vision HDR content, but it's also great for creating HDR content. I actually recently got a chance to edit and film and produce a music video using this screen to grade and edit in HDR for the first time. And I was definitely impressed with how versatile this machine is when it comes to content creation. The mini LED display has a peak brightness of 1600 nits in HDR mode, which is more than enough for consuming and creating in HDR. Not to mention it has a 120Hz ProMotion display, so every animation looks smooth. And lately I've been hooking it up to my 34-inch display using this dock from Bridge, and my display isn't the greatest when it comes to color grading, but it's amazing for gaming and media playback. It's also very helpful to see how videos will look on non-Apple screens, so I have an idea of how most people will be viewing it. Now, I'm not a super spec'd out tech head when it comes to the tools that I use. Like, I don't care about really the megapixels on my camera. I don't care about the CPU, GPU, all the stuff inside my computer. I just want things to look good, and I want it to perform when I want to use it. And the performance on the Apple Silicon machines has actually been able to handle everything I've thrown at it, from the M1 Mac Mini to this M1 Pro Macbook Pro. They're solid. Unless you're doing 3D work, I think the M1 Pro is more than enough, and in most cases, the regular M1 is more than enough. But don't get me wrong, you can definitely max these machines out and push them to the limits. You will notice a ceiling if you try to do anything that's like super intensive, but for regular YouTube content or social media content, people that just wanted to edit what they just filmed, you don't have to worry about it on these machines. The one spec that I would invest in and throw all my money at is RAM. Memory is vital when it comes to these Apple Silicon machines, and I learned that when I got the M1 Mac Mini with the 16 gigs of RAM. Many of my colleagues were getting the same machine but with 8 gigs, and they instantly regretted it. So if you have the extra money, throw it at the memory. And you know what? I actually appreciate the fact that these Apple Macs with their new silicon are taking me out of the mindset of worrying about cores and GPU and specs. It's starting to get to the point where I know I'll be good if I just invest in the Pro machine. And at the rate that these Macs are improving, the future is looking super bright. Speaking of performance, the only benchmarks that matter to me on these machines are the export times in Final Cut Pro. And I have a couple exports to reference for you guys here on the M1 Pro Macbook Pro. First project is the DJI Mini 3 Pro video that I just uploaded to the channel last week, and this project had footage from the Sony FX9, the Mavic Air 2S, and of course the Mini 3 Pro. Also, there were several different effects, motion blur overlays, and different codecs. And I'll say if you're actually editing off of a fast SSD before you import your footage, make sure that you select leave files in place. This way your machine isn't working double time and you can actually get to your edit quicker. The M1 Pro Macbook Pro actually exported the DJI Mini 3 Pro video in 6 minutes and 45 seconds. An export like this could have easily taken like 12-15 minutes on my M1 Mac Mini. Now, the only time that I actually noticed the M1 Pro is struggling is when I use the Neat Video plugin to denoise the footage. Now, if you know anything about Neat Video, you know that it destroys your timeline and your render times. This plugin is not for weak editing rigs. In the past, I've used my 2018 MacBook Pro and I couldn't even use Neat Video at all. But when you're able to use it, it's like magic for cleaning up noise. Now, the other project that we're going to reference is actually the video that you're watching right now. Now, of course, at the time of recording this, I don't know the export times, but I'm going to put them up on the screen. And to give you some context about this video, it had a pretty thick intro. Now, of course, throughout the video, there's just a B-roll laid and maybe a couple text overlays or titles. But the intro had a lot of nested clips, a lot of masking, pretty intensive color correcting because I was actually using the Laowa probe lens, which shifts pretty warm. And also, of course, you can only shoot the fastest aperture you can shoot on the Laowa probe lens is f14, so I have to have a lot of light, but I didn't have a ton of light, and had a bit of noise in the shadow, so I used Neat Video to clean it up a bit. Hopefully it turned out great. But I don't doubt that this probably exported. I'm gonna take a guess right now. I don't know what the number is, of course, by the time of recording this, but I'm gonna say it took 10 minutes, maybe. I'd say it took between 8 and 10 minutes. I'll say 8 and 10 minutes. Hopefully I was right. We'll see at the end of this. Maybe I was wrong. All in all, just saying that, you know, I don't know what a professional is. I don't know. I mean, I get paid for the work that I produce, but I'd say if you want to make anything like what I'm making on YouTube, or anything else that you would consider less than what I'm making on YouTube, the M1 Pro is more than enough, and you'll be able to get by considerably. I think that this machine may have a pretty high ceiling. You won't notice its age probably for another 4 years if you're just editing 4K content, and things are only going to get easier as, you know, software updates come out and further optimization happens with, you know, the software and the hardware and the M1 architecture. It's only going to get better. But I'm happy to say that you can go with, you know, the base model M1 Pro Macbook Pro and be good. This one only has 16 gigs of RAM. If I had my choice, you know, in the future, I would definitely invest in more RAM, 32 gigs, 64 gigs, whatever the max is on RAM. That's going to improve your longevity as far as life expectancy for your machine. And with these Apple Silicon Macs, definitely invest in RAM. Just throw all your money at RAM, and of course also internal storage, because the SSDs built in are super fast, and you don't have to worry about, you know, carrying around T5s or anything like that. But yeah, we're in a good spot right now as far as being content creators out here. This is a very good time to create. But that's about it for me, guys. It's been a pleasure as usual. Hopefully you guys like the video. If you do, consider subscribing, liking, all that good stuff, commenting, whatever. Until next time, guys, it's been a pleasure as usual. Stay fresh. Peace.